In this lecture, we are going to prevent duplicate users from appearing in our site. It's possible that a username or email may be taken from somebody else. If that's the case, we should reject the request. WordPress has a set of functions for helping us prevent this issue. Let's give them a try. In your editor, open the signup.php file. After the conditional statement, we are going to extract the values from the params array into variables. First, let's create a variable called email. The value for this variable will be the sanitize email function. So far, we've been escaping data. If we're outputting data onto the document, we should escape our data. Things are different this time around. We're trying to insert data into the database. Data that will be inserted into our database should be sanitized. WordPress has a few functions for sanitizing data. The sanitize email function will sanitize an email. The sanitized email will be returned by this function. Let's pass in the params email variable. Next, let's create a variable called username. The value for this variable will be the sanitize text field function. This function will return a sanitized value for regular text. Let's pass in the params username variable. Lastly, let's create a variable called password. The value for this variable will be the sanitized text field function with the params password variable. Our variables are ready. We can proceed to check for duplicate users. Below the variables, add a conditional statement. Inside the block, return the response variable. If the user exists, we are going to return the response variable. Inside the parentheses, let's start adding our conditions. There will be a total of 3 conditions. The first condition will be the username exists function. This function is defined by WordPress. It'll check the database for a username. We can pass in a username as an argument. Let's pass in the username variable. Conveniently, this function will return a Boolean value. If the username exists, the function will return true, thus causing our function to return early. Let's add an OR operator. The next condition will be the isEmail function. This is another function defined by WordPress. As the name suggests, it'll check the format of an email. Before checking if an email is taken, we should check the format of the email. If the email is in an invalid format, there isn't a point in checking the database. Let's pass in the email variable. This function will return a Boolean value. If the email is valid, the function will return true. However, the goal is to check if the email is invalid. Let's add the not operator to the function. After adding this operator, add another OR operator. The final condition will be the email exists function. Let's pass in the email variable. This function is similar to the username exists function. It'll check the database for an existing email. If there's an account with the same email, we are going to reject the request. Overall, we have a conditional statement for preventing visitors from registering an account with duplicate usernames or emails. Let's try testing our function. Open the Postman application. Inside the body of the request, I'm going to update the username property to an existing username on my site. For my personal project, I have a user called admin. Yours may be different. You can double check your site for a username. After updating the username in the request, I'm going to initiate the request. As expected, the request will be rejected by our endpoint. The status property is set to 1, which indicates a username exists. Next, I'm going to change the username to a unique value. Lastly, I'll send the request. This time, the request will go through. The status property will have a value of 2. We've successfully checked for duplicate users. We can start creating a user. In the next lecture, let's try inserting a user into the database.